So first things I would be looking for as I'm going into the house is I'm going to say, all right, they've obviously done some work to this, but like what's going on here with the concrete? Looks like they've maybe parged it, fixed it up a little bit, but you see a lot of issues with the concrete work here, especially down here where a lot of water runoff is coming from. So that means water is dumping somewhere and eroding the concrete from underneath or the soil from underneath, which in turns would, necessarily break the concrete at some point in time. You see steps drop, fixes to, let's say the steps had sagged, maybe it needs to be mud jacked. If you want to know what mud jacking is, basically they're inserting a foam into the ground, helps raise the steps in the simplest form. I'd be looking at the wood, this is going into the ground. Is it rotting at the base? Do we need to be worried about that? Some financing may, be worried about that as you're going through it, like an FHA or a VA. They may flag certain things that look like they're harmful or hazardous to a potential buyer. So that's just something I would look at, bring up to them if I thought it was a concern. As we keep going through this, we've got the exterior here. So it looks like there's almost a little bit of repair here with some extra paint, maybe some caulk around the window. Not a big deal, maybe, but the home inspector would tell us for certain. And then other things I'd be looking out for is, okay, hey, this pad obviously has a little bit of a crack here. Trying to zoom in, that's not going to work out. Down here, the kick plates. So when you're going in the doors, that kick plate rotted out. Is there a lot of water that's just sitting there, rotting out the step? Things to look out for, not necessarily happening in this home, but that's something I would be mindful of. Paneling. Okay, so this is a thicker wood paneling. You can tell by the look of it that the big grooves here. And when he was there in person, I just told him, I was like, knock on the wall, see if it sounds hollow or not. I'm assuming it's a thicker wood paneling, older for the generation of the house, and it was. We were also trying to see if it sounds really hollow, it might not be insulated. Again, these are things that you may or may not be able to tell, but things I would still check. Check the windows. Are the seals broken? Are they replacement windows or are they original? These look like they've been replaced. When? Could have been 5 years, 10 years, 15 years ago. Seals get compromised over time. Sometimes they can be fixed. Sometimes you need a new window. And then, it becomes I literally had one where we went and looked at the exterior of the house. I pulled the siding back because it was flipped up and the whole window well was rotted out. So those are really things you have to pay attention to, because when you're going through these homes, the emotions involved, right? You want to love the house, especially if you've been competing on offers and you're like, this is the house for me. It may not be, because if you don't have the money to fix these things or the seller's not willing to fix them, then it can come back and really bite you in the ass later. So things to be mindful of as you're going through it. This one was done pretty well overall from what we looked at, but there were a couple things that I pointed out to my agent to be mindful of when he was going through, like I said. Smaller house, easy to see any issues, also easy to overlook any issues. First thing I saw here with the tile, I told him, I was like, go feel it. I'm assuming it's vinyl. Okay, now a lot of days, most people are using a vinyl tile in the bathrooms, in the kitchens, because it's easier to install. It's groutable, so it looks like real marble tile. It looks like real porcelain tile, but it's not, okay? And there's good and bad to this. Sometimes it could be the bad is it may not add as much value, but in reality, let's say you dropped a plate on this, okay? If you dropped it on straight tile or marble, more than likely the plate's gonna break and or chip the tile, okay? You don't know what's gonna happen in that instance, but when it hits this vinyl, usually it absorbs more often than not. You can still break things, but it's maybe a little bit more resilient, still water resistant or waterproof, depending on which kind they use. But it's just something you can look out for and visually see that it's overly designed. And I mean, the print on the tile you can see is a print and not necessarily natural looking. Again, nothing wrong with it. You're going to see it in most of the properties anymore because it's a lot cheaper. Like these tiles, I pulled them up online. They could be $1, they could be $3. A whole case of tiles could be $60. So it's really not expensive to use, and it makes it look nice aesthetically. And you'll see, again, I'll show you a different one as we go into the bathrooms. But again, like this house was done really well. They have nice cabinetry. They use the space really well. As we go into the kitchen here, you'll see, again, like that tile looks really good. Not really tile, okay. Things to also be mindful of when you see cabinets in corners. Does the cabinet open all the way? We've had new construction homes where the fridge right here didn't open all the way. Literally, it hit the wall. On a brand new construction house, one of my agents had the door open and it just banged right into the wall. Not going to work, right? So you need to make sure that everything opens, that you're opening things, closing things, seeing if latches are broken, hinges are off, because sometimes these things are done pretty quickly. Things happen. Is there scratches? Do the cabinets need to be replaced? Is there a door that's broken? Like, you want to figure that stuff out ahead of time. Make sure that, especially if you're going in as is and doing no inspections on a house, which a lot of people are doing, you want to make sure you're not missing this stuff, okay? As we move on, again, nothing crazy to super, stick out. This outlet's crooked, just could have been installed wrong. Not the end of the world, and it was probably already like that. But these are little things that I've noticed over time. I mean, we had, again, a brand new construction home, walked in, and this countertop was completely crooked, like visibly crooked. I set a pen on it. The pen rolled off onto the stove. I said, this is great. Obviously, if you want all your food to roll onto the stove for you. But again, brand new house, brand new flip, whatever, like pay attention to those things because you're going to overlook them. It's very easy to overlook. And quite frankly, a lot of agents aren't taught to look for this because they don't see enough deals during the year to see all the home inspections, especially through COVID. A lot of people weren't doing home inspections. So what does that mean? They're just writing an offer, going to settlement. They don't know all the issues that are wrong with the house. They're not seeing all these inspection reports. I've literally seen thousands of home inspection reports on our listings that our buyers had. And my job was to step in and help negotiate those and make sure that people weren't, bailing on the house for the wrong reason. Case in point, when I went to buy my first house, it was from one of our sellers. I said, hey, I need this, and this fixed because they're faulty. The water heater was beyond its last leg. There was some water issues with the deck and not, being properly flashed. A couple other small things. And he's like, no, I'm not doing that. The seller, I'm not doing that. I'm not spending $10,000 in repairs. I'll sell it to someone else. And I said to him, I was like, I already had my contractor look at it. We're talking about $1,800 worth of repairs to have my guy do it. Does that seem reasonable to you? And they're like, oh, well, $1,800. I thought it was going to be much more. Well, if I would have called Joe Schmo off, Angie's List or one of these other websites, it very well may have cost $10,000 to do at the time. Because a lot of these contractors and plumbers are so busy, electricians, whatever vendor. So prices of materials have gone up. Time has gone up, right? They're paying employees. Like, you have to look at the inflationary things that are going on. They have a smaller microwave here over top. It's a nicer microwave, but it gave you a higher clearance. Where some microwaves, if they would put a normal one, it wouldn't have given you much cooking space. So again, small things to look out for when you're going through a home. Usability, how you're going to use it. Are you going to have space to cook? Are there space for your pots, your pans, all the things. Moving on, bathroom. So this tile right here, very similar. Again, looks like a marble tile. It's a vinyl tile. And you can find these in these hexagon shapes, all kinds of different ones. Some are expensive, some are not. Some are super cheap, some are not. I think there's some that you could find for like $1 or something, a tile at like a Lowe's or one of those. This is Home Depot. But there's so many of these now. They're becoming more prevalent. There's nothing wrong with them, for my opinion. Not, a contractor or a home inspector, but from what I've seen, you're going to start seeing these in almost every flip that's out there anymore. It's just the way it is. Unless it's some super high-end luxury $1 million plus home, like we're still seeing these in $700,000 homes. Because again, it's durable. It's not going to scratch. It's not going to dent. It's not going to, let's say there was an issue with it. You should be able to rip that tile out without breaking every single tile around it and then just, replace it with a new one. So pluses and minuses going through there. A nice sink, smaller sink, making use of the space. Let's go through here and skip some of that. But again, really nice looking rehab. Other things to be mindful of, sometimes they may not have recessed lighting. There's no recessed lighting in the bedroom. They added that in the other rooms. They look like they did 4-inch lights, not 6-inch lights. It's not a huge deal again, but things to be mindful of is when they're adding electrical, did they pull permits for the electrical? More often than not, the answer is no. From what I've seen and what, our home inspector would verify is more often than not, when they're going through these flipped homes, they don't pull permits. In this instance, the agent said they did pull permits because they actually are the owner of the home as well. So they have, a double target on their back with having a license and also selling the home and owning it. So there's more things they have to be worried about disclosing or not disclosing that they know could be a material fact, at least here in Maryland. Again, as we're going through, you've got more vinyl tile, but you have the nicer showers. So they put the money where it mattered, right? Nice amenities on the sinks, the double sink, squeezing it in there. really utilizing the space well. Where are you gonna put your towels? Oh, they got you covered here. Where are you gonna put all your stuff? Like, these are things when you're in a smaller home, you have to be mindful of, especially as a first-time home buyer or someone that's maybe moving down from a bigger home. These are really important things. Like, do I have the space? Do I have the storage? How is it being utilized? The basement. So this was listed as a 3-bedroom, 2-bath, I think, 1.5 bath, whatever it was. But either way, they're counting it as 3 bedrooms, the bedroom being down here in the basement. Now, there is no closet in this. There is a hanging rack. So from an appraisal standpoint, I'm not sure that they would actually count it as a bedroom in the basement, even though it's got an egress window. You're splitting hairs, but again, it depends on the appraiser, it depends on the bank. I'm assuming personally they're probably not going to count this as a bedroom from a value perspective. That could be a $10,000 swing on the house. It could be less, it could be more. Just depends on comps in the area, in your area. Basements are huge, especially here in Maryland. We have a pretty high water table, but not as high as others, which is why we do have basements. We get a lot of humidity, we get a lot of moisture. You see a lot of concrete block foundations, and you usually see what's called this efflorescence that pops up on a lot of these concrete blocks. And what that is it's this little buildup on the block, and I'll show you within reason what that looks like here. So you can see these tiles are real dirty. They're splitting in certain areas. What that is called hydrostatic pressure. This is just a random website I found online. You can Google it and find more information about it, but they had some images, so it was helpful. And it broke down what that hydrostatic pressure was. Basically, all those minerals and water and things that filter down, they got to go somewhere, right? Concrete block is extremely porous, which means it's absorbing water. So it's pulling the water from the outside in through the block into the house. At some point in time, you'll see the walls sweat. You'll see where people put waterproofing systems in. This is the reason behind that, okay? It's to help mitigate and pull the water out of the house. So this stair-stepping crack, if you see a house with that, we've seen some of those instances where the house had to be resupported in the basement, sometimes to the extreme. But this is now a structural issue. There's so much pressure pushing the house inward that it's now becoming unsafe to an extent. And it's not always that bad, okay? So let's just think about it that way. Again, I'm not a home inspector. I'm just someone with a lot of experience dealing with these things. When you get this buildup, they may fix these cracks. They may have bars pulling in to support the foundation. You'll see where they have, like I said, that buildup of, like, it looks like block just like pouring out of itself almost, and it flakes off, and you get it in your basement a lot of times. That's what that is, and that's that hydrostatic pressure. There's water in your block. So I'd usually consult a waterproofing professional if you need one. We got some, and I'd probably get at least 2 bids on something when you're looking at a big job like that, because it can get very expensive, and a lot of guys are trying to upsell you on things. And some guys, like the guy we use, he's very honest in my opinion. He's not going to sell you something you don't need. There's been so many instances where we sent him out to jobs where he could have put a $5,000 waterproofing system in, and instead he's like, hey, really, honestly, this will stop if you just fix the gutters, grade them away from the house, bring the dirt level up, grade it, make sure everything's draining away, like just get the water away from the house, and it fixes the problem over time. And then there's instances where they're like, no matter what you do, you're still going to get the water. You're going to need this. The water's always going to be in the wall. And you'll see where people do like a dry lock or something where they paint the walls white. There's other ones out there as well, but dry lock's the most well-known one. So you get these buildups, right, on the wall. I don't see any French drain system put in here. The French drain would be, probably 1 inch, 2 inches wide of a drain tile. Some of these older houses may have a drain tile or a French drain put in around the house. Sometimes the French drain has been concreted over where they may have dug out a foot. It just depends on the system. Okay, there's so many ways to do it. Again, I'm not an expert on that. I'm just going over the instances that I've seen, personally experienced, had issues with, all the things. Water heaters, again, a big thing where, especially in the basement, you collect a lot of moisture, or you maybe have an older water heater that doesn't have this expansion tank here. Let's just say you go to a house and there's no expansion tank. There's not one of these bad boys on it. More than likely that water heater is older. It's not new, and for it to be new and up to code, it would usually have one of these installed on it. Basically, that's just it. If pressure builds up, it's going into the tank, so that way it doesn't just explode the whole water heater right away. And what does that look like? You may see this corrosion around water heaters, right? This is going to leak if it's not already. Obviously, these are leaking in some instances where the water's dripping over the fitting, and you need someone to come out and you need to fix it properly. And it could be that you have hard water It could be there's just a ton of moisture in the area. And you're like, well, what's hard water? All right, so hard water is, again, basically from minerals in the ground. Here we go. I'm gonna give you what I'm assuming are expert opinions, but also what off of what I already know. So minerals, hard water may have health benefits, yada yada, associated with the minerals. It could, make your dishes look dirty, can make your showers look dirty. It can wreck and create a film on a lot of shower doors that have well and septics. You may see that, and it again is the minerals in there. Let's see what we got. Let me pull this back up so you can see it yourself. All right, so calcium and magnesium right here. All right, these right here are what are causing a lot of that hard water. And the way to fix that is to put some kind of softener filtration system on the property to help filter those out. If you're on public water, you probably don't have as much of this issue. You may have different issues with the chlorine and things. You may have this issue, but more often than not, we see these with well and septic homes. Well, particularly nothing to do with the septic, all to do with the well. And that's, again, ways to fix it. You can do those things yourself. I'd usually recommend having a professional company come put these in. A lot of times people rent the systems. Sometimes they buy the systems. They could be a few $1,000s to install. They could be a few $100s or thousands to maintain, depending on the size of the home. If you've got water pressure tanks, holding tanks, things that are going wrong over time. Again, things to consider when you're walking through the house is, does that water heater look anything like this? Because those fittings need to be replaced, okay? It's not if they're leaking, when they're leaking, they need to be replaced before you have a bigger problem. Electrical. So they didn't have a picture of the electrical panel box in here, but I had my agent go to the box when I saw something on the disclosures saying that they updated the electrical. Now, this agent did it the right way from what I saw, and she's a new agent. From what she said, she disclosed at least that they replaced the box. Now, immediately, I said to him, I was like, make sure they pulled permits, because if they didn't, that could come back and bite your buyer in the ass later down the road. So he said, I talked to her. She said they did pull permits. She just hasn't put the sticker on it yet. And I'll revert back. I had told him earlier on when he walked into the house, I was like, go to the basement, go to the panel box. Did they put an updated sticker? It's usually orange on there saying, it was signed off on and done recently when this was done. He's like, no, there's no sticker. She said, hey, I actually have the stickers. They're either with me or they're in the house. I just haven't put them on there. The validity of that, I don't know, but I'm going to go on her word and say they did it right. Okay. So, but if they wouldn't have pulled permits on some of the plumbing things they did, some of the electrical things, if it came up with the county later and maybe they want to finish this basement and they do pull permits and the inspector comes in, he's like, well, this panel was new and it was never signed off on, that could potentially create issues. We've only seen it happen one time where, I had a deck where the owners did not pull permits for it. So they said, or it wasn't disclosed that there weren't any permits on it, but it was actually the builder that put the deck on. So we were able to talk with the county. We had the inspector come out. They signed off on it. All was well. But that could have been to the point where I've heard people having to rip their decks off their house. I had a client that they had an HOA and they didn't approve the patio. So he knew that when he bought the house, the patio wasn't approved. And when we went to sell the house, that HOA flagged that $15,000 patio and he had to have it ripped out. Like, that sucked. And the new buyers were okay with it. New appliances in here. So again, walking through, look at the bases of the floor, upstairs, downstairs, look at the walls around the trim. Do you see rotting wood? Do you see peeling paint? Do you see what could have been, potential termite damage? In this one, they replaced floor joists. Why'd they replace floor joists? Okay. What was the reason behind that? Was there a leak? Was there termite damage? A lot of older houses, there may be old termite damage, and this may not be an issue at all. But if I didn't disclose to someone and say, hey, we replaced this for X, Y, and Z reason, there was previous termite damage, there's not an issue anymore. They wouldn't raise a red flag to it more often than not. But if I didn't tell them, and then they saw this, and then they saw termite damage around the other beams, now they may start asking questions of, well, why did you replace these? Because I see termite damage. Do you have termite problems? And were they disclosed or not? So if there's another big thing, mold. If there's what looks to be mold on the walls, I don't see anything in this instance, but sometimes you may see some up on the rafters. It may be white looking, like a white substance up in the top of the rafters. Sometimes that could be mold, surface mold, not necessarily a huge deal, but if someone's hypoallergenic to mold, it could become a problem. So these are just ways to mitigate risk. These are ways for you to go through and figure out if the house you're buying is going to be a good fit for you or not. Should you do an inspection? This one, again, my agent was going there because he was concerned about the septic line coming into the house. He thought the fitting looked weird around the main line. I said, all right, well, he said, I already talked to the home inspector that we were going to use. I'm sending him a picture of it. That's why I'm here. And I told him to check these other things. But, if he wouldn't have done those things, maybe his client would have bought the house as is, no inspections, move forward. And then all of a sudden the septic's backing up into their house. Like one of my other clients, they were doing a home inspection on their listing, right? My listing. And the septic tank backed up all the way into their basement. It was almost $17,000 worth of damage on a basement that was just finished. So picture this, you just finish your basement, you put your house on the market, you're under contract, and then they start flooding shit back into your basement, literally, during the inspection. And then I get the phone call, the septic's failing, it's backing up into the house. There's literally shit everywhere. I had to call my client and tell him that, like, dude was from New Jersey, picture the accent, picture the attitude. It got heavy. Okay. He wasn't mad at me, but he was frustrated. And it took 3 months for us to fix that damage and then find a new buyer to sell that to. And we'll get into a whole other case on what happens in those instances. But again, these are just things you want to look out for, especially on a flipped home. New construction, I'll go into a whole other thing there because I can't tell you how many times we go through a new construction home. And again, like I said, like they couldn't even open the fridge. Mismatched countertops, outlets aren't working, siding's not put on correctly. Like there's all these things you have to be mindful of when you're walking through the house. It's not just, I hired my agent, they did a home inspection, they wrote an offer, like they did nothing for me. Like this is the stuff your agent should be doing for you. Every single house I walk through with a client, I'm pointing things out to deter them from the house or to be mindful of the house because I want to know how much they love the house and how much they are willing to do because I don't want to sell them a bag of goods. Okay, I want them to love the house as it sits and understand what they're getting into so that they don't get screwed down the road. So hopefully this video was helpful for you guys. We're going to do a whole lot more on this because we have so much experience, so much knowledge to share with everyone. And there's so much uncertainty right now in the market and people are making decisions that are impacting them for a long, long time. So keep an eye out, guys. Subscribe to the channel, like the video. Let me know if you liked it or if it was shit or if it was helpful. All right.